Preseason polls are meaningless. They should be meaningless, but are they? Are they truly meaningless? I think there's some underlying perceptions that are built through the preseason polls that affect how we think and certainly affect how the College Football Playoff Committee thinks and perceives the season and the teams and how the media perceives the teams. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. The AP poll is about to be released. It should be at noon Eastern time, but give or take. And so we are awaiting word on the release of the Associated Press poll that started back in 1936. Of course, if you followed our series in which we have reviewed all the national championship seasons in college football, and we've made it all the way back through the 1980s, and we'll continue to do so. Please check out that series. Great live streams involving all of you, and we appreciate your participation and your fervor, your knowledge, and your insight into the various championship races throughout college football that the AP started in 1936, and until 1997, what the AP voters, the media that were part of that establishment had to say about college football national championships, that was the word. That meant everything. Yes, there was the UPI, the United Press International, that was supplanted by the coaches poll sponsored by USA Today starting in 1989, I believe. But it's been the Associated Press poll that has been the gold standard for whatever reason, because it was the first. And because the writers obviously were the communication of football to the masses, for decades and decades and decades, of course, pre-internet and certainly pre-television, of course, the newspaper writers shaped college football. They brought us the narrative of college football. What America thought about particular players and coaches and teams were shaped by the writers. And so the AP has held this certain status in college football that I have certainly at times taken a shot at because I have seen it up close, not incompetent writers, but writers who are focused and whose job clearly and exclusively involves the particular team that they follow, that they have to write about each and every day. Therefore, they don't have a broad scope of what's going on in college football and how good the level of teams are within their own conference, let alone across the nation. So welcome into the Voice of College Football. We welcome your comments and your questions there in the chat. We have dropped a link in the chat. Please call the show and we'll talk college football. And again, await the release of the AP preseason poll. If you see that it's been released, please let me know, because I will continue to look and refresh pages to make sure that we don't miss it or we get on it as quickly as possible. But certainly let me know when you've seen that the AP poll has dropped. And talk about dropping, most of these teams, or a large portion of these teams, will drop out of the rankings. Some will re-enter the rankings, as of course they shuffle every week, and some will never make it back. And it's a pretty good portion. I asked somebody the other day that follows college football, that covers college football, how many teams in the preseason AP poll do you think from last season finished ranked? Asked a few different people this question. The most egregious, the one response that gave the most credit to the writers was that they probably missed 3 or 4 teams. There were probably 3 or 4 teams in the preseason poll that did not finish ranked. That was the response I received. They probably missed 3 or 4 teams. Other people guessed 8 or 9. Other people guessed 5 or 6. 13. So there were 13, more than half of the poll, the preseason poll last year, did not finish ranked. It's usually closer than that. They're usually closer on their estimations than that. But we can pretty much be assured that 8 or 9 of these teams will not be ranked when the season finishes. The other aspect of this that I don't like is that the writers or anybody who does a top 25 poll, me included, have different approaches. We all have different approaches, and the approach that bothers me is the prediction approach, meaning I am predicting what the final poll is going to be. I'm going to look at schedules and I'm going to predict games. I think that's a self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain extent. And then again, I certainly don't like. Okay, Paxton is saying that it's out. Okay, I got to refresh some pages, I guess, because the pages I'm on do not have them listed yet. So we'll jump on it in just a second. The other aspect is that it shapes the narrative. And I will admit that I use the rankings, I reference the rankings, but I do it more from the standpoint, thank you, Sports Talk 101, and please join the show. I've left the link in the chat, so grab the link and jump on board. Anybody who's interested in talking about the AP preseason poll or anything in college football. So we'll get to the poll here in just a second. But in regards to the perception that it provides, and again, it's not that I never reference rankings, because there is, if a team's ranked number 5 in the country after 9 games of the season, shoot, you can argue that they should be number 3 or number 7, but they've proven that they, at that juncture of the season, are one of the best teams in college football. So the rankings, now you can argue number 25 should not be ranked or somebody else should be number 25. And so that's where I have an issue with just using that, oh, so-and-so beat this many ranked teams or lost to this many ranked teams, and some of them were 23 or 25 in the country. Well, there's another 15 teams that have just as much of a resume as the teams at the back end of the poll. Okay, let's find the poll because everybody's telling me that it's out. But it is not out on ESPN yet. College football rankings projecting. College football rankings 2023, 19 minutes ago. Preseason poll revealed. Bingo, there we go. We'll go to Sports Illustrated. And all right. Georgia is number 1. Georgia has been the best team in the country, back-to-back national championships, and looking for a three-peat for the first time since, I believe, Minnesota back in the 1930s. Can you imagine? Wow. So we're looking at a dynasty in Georgia. New starting quarterback in Carson Beck, but they received 60 of the 63 first-place votes. So this is my issue with Georgia. Best team in the country the last 2 years, no doubt about it. However, I will say that they were rather fortunate in their playoff situations against Ohio State and against Alabama. We can sit here and argue for weeks and weeks and weeks without end that Alabama may have defeated them with 2 healthy starting wide receivers in the national championship game of 21, and that Ohio State would have won with a made field goal. Of course, they would have, or a Marvin Harrison personal foul call. So Georgia's been rather fortunate in these 2 championship games. They won the games fair and square. Not stating that. I'm just saying they were fortunate. They were nail biters. They, of course, lost to Bama by 17 in the SEC championship game. So now they have a new leader in Carson Beck. So that's a big difference there in Stetson Bennett to Carson Beck. Beck, the higher recruit, higher ceiling, all of that. But we know that Stetson Bennett may have finally received his just due for what he accomplished in college. Because that guy definitely took his broad of jokes and just nobody gave that guy credit for anything or expected him to do anything. And everybody just wanted him to go see the bench in favor of JT Daniels and other quarterbacks. And all he did was win, and become a legendary player. Stetson Bennett is a legend. Okay. Back to this team. Again, best team in the country the last 2 years, the champion, the undisputed champion, fortunate in the playoffs, had things go their way to a certain extent. Now they come back and they've got a three-peat. So if you're into odds, if you are into probabilities, and you look at the probability of a team winning again a third national championship, then the odds are against Georgia doing that. However, at the same time, who has the greatest probability of reaching the playoff? I think it's Georgia by far. They play in a marginal division. You know, there are good teams in the. I don't want to downgrade the division because it's much better than what either ACC division was. Of course, the ACC no longer split into divisions. It's better than the Big 12 top to bottom, and it's better than either Pac-12 division top to bottom, and it's better than the Big 10 Western division. So the SEC East is probably the second or third best division in college football. However, there isn't anyone there to seriously challenge Georgia. I don't believe Tennessee is up to the challenge. So with Georgia not playing a meaningful non-conference game, which should never happen in college football, that's a joke. It's a travesty. It needs to be changed. But again, we've got new leadership in college football. And so these schools can do whatever they want and schedule whomever they want. And so it's just ridiculous that Georgia, and it's not necessarily on Georgia. We know that Georgia's not like they're afraid to play teams. They go out and schedule legitimate teams like they did last year in Oregon. And in the future, Ohio State and Clemson in the past for many, many years. And Georgia goes out there and plays. They're not backing down from anyone. It just so happened that the Oklahoma series, it was in the best interest of the SEC to cancel that series because of Oklahoma's entry into the conference. Therefore, we're missing a big game from Georgia out of conference. So that's unfortunate. And Georgia plays one of the weaker schedules that you could ever imagine for an SEC team. So their entry into the playoff has the greatest probability of anybody. So they've basically already made the playoff. Michigan in number 2. So there's two brave souls out there that are predicting, I guess they're either telling us that Michigan is the best team in the country or they are predicting a national championship. Again, depending on what their mode of operation is. But considering Michigan's schedule is weak, light, outside of 2 games, who are they playing in the Western Division? Really nobody. Minnesota, they don't have Iowa or Wisconsin, and of course Michigan's not playing a non-conference game either. So the path is extremely light for Michigan as well. Ohio State's got 1 vote. And they have the tougher of the 3 paths, and then it proceeds from there. The Alabama LSU situation at 4 and 5 tells us that Alabama and LSU are being evaluated in such a way that about half the people like LSU to win the West and about half the people like Alabama to win the West. And I would think if Alabama had a proven quarterback that they would be given and plus they're playing the matchup against LSU in Tuscaloosa, that they would be given a substantial edge there. However, who's really confident in the combination of Jalen Milroe, Tyler Buckner, and Ty Simpson? USC at number 6. This poll pretty much mirrors the coaches poll that did have Alabama ahead of Ohio State, and with a couple coaches voting for Alabama at number 1. Florida State right in front of Clemson, Washington at number 10. Again, the rest of it looks right in line with the coaches poll. We've got a call coming in here at the Voice of College Football. So let's take that call. But first, we need to take a few precautions here. We've got Sean on the line. Sean, what's going on?
Hey, not much. How's it going, Mark?
I'm good. What's a good word today?
Oh, nothing much. Just kind of exciting seeing the AP poll come out. It's always the second poll kind of lets you know that football is right around the corner here. So it's sad to see the summer go a little bit, wind down, but we'll be excited when the toe meets leather here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, Sean, do you have any thoughts about the AP poll?
Yes. Thoughts about like the college football landscape in general. This is one of the weakest years I think at the top that I can really recall. It just feels like every team that's been really good. I kind of see. I don't see any team that I feel has been building towards this year at the top. I feel like every team's. At Georgia, I don't think they're as good as they've been. I don't anticipate them being that. I think they've lost so much talent on the defensive side of the ball that has just been so dominant the last couple of years. They'll still be probably great defensively, but I don't think we're going to see, this entire unit get taken in the first 100 picks of the NFL draft like we've seen the last couple of years. I don't know. They're the clear number 1, and I think they're more vulnerable this year than they've been in the past couple of years. Michigan, I think they're good. They're a really good, solid team, but I think JJ McCarthy is one of the most overrated players in college football. I don't think they've really got the weapons that will kill you. And let's not be mistaken, they've got some internal issues right now. And they just fired their offensive coordinator today, I saw, for some issues. So Ohio State's replacing a lot. Bama, they're number 4 based on reputation to me. I don't see a number 4 team in the country really when I look at their roster. And yeah, so I'm looking at the top, and it's like everybody has a bunch of questions. And I didn't feel that way about Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, or even Michigan last year.
Sean, back up on the Michigan offensive coordinator comment.
Yes.
Do you have breaking news for us or something?
I just saw like 20 minutes ago, Matt Weiss is being investigated for some sort of computer access crimes.
That was like 7 months ago. So he
got fired.
Yeah, he got fired a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's been fired for like 6 or 7 months.
Okay. Okay. So
or whatever it's been, he's been fired for a long time. Okay.
All right.
You were alerting me to something. I was like, wow, did I miss something huge?
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. I guess I just missed that when it happened for whatever reason. Oddly, but no, am I off at all on that take? Because I don't see like Georgia's the clear number 1. And they were so far ahead of everyone that they could take a step back and still be the best team in the country. But am I off in thinking like this doesn't feel like a great year at the top?
No, I think you got something there. And primarily because Bama has been so incredibly rock solid as a national championship contender, if not the just prohibitive favorite most seasons. And this, unless something changes drastically, and I'm not saying that they won't get decent quarterback play, but they will be playing with their worst quarterback possibly under Nick Saban for his entire tenure this year. Yep. Even if that quarterback succeeds and has a decent season, throws 25 touchdown passes and 8 picks or whatever, the drop off from Tua, Mac Jones, and Bryce Young is going to be monumental. And even the guys
The
that
Jalen Hurts too.
preceded those
Don't forget about
guys.
that.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Don't forget about Jalen Hurts. He's pretty good. He's pretty good.
Sure, Jalen Hurts, but I was going with the last three were prolific passers.
Yes.
Jalen Hurts was not a prolific passer with Alabama by any stretch.
Right.
So I was separating those three, playing in a much different offense and being prolific passers. Now, the guys before that, we're just playing a different style of football, and especially at the beginning of Saban's era with Greg McElroy and A.J. McCarron, people didn't have questions about them. They were future pro quarterbacks, holding clipboards, but still future pro quarterbacks.
And not much was ever asked of them. Not you.
Yes.
The way Alabama's played the last few years, a whole lot's been put on the quarterback's shoulders. A whole lot.
It's a different game.
Yeah.
So I don't know that any one of these three quarterbacks has it in them to play at an elite level. Again, I'm confident that they'll be fine. USC was, they're the sixth best team in the country, according to the AP and the coaches poll, but their defense last year was just incredibly awful. And Ohio State's in big spots was incredibly awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like when you first started to say that, Sean, I got to admit, I thought, well, this is a recency bias, kind of an inverse recency bias, because we always think, or depending on your perspective, some people think everything that's going on right now is the best, and other people think, well, no, everything that's happened in the past is better. And if we went year to year, I just think most of what you had to say is a lot of it is Alabama based. And Clemson for close to 10 years was a given that they were going to have an elite defensive line, a great defense, a great quarterback, and they were going to be this juggernaut that was going to contend for a national championship. Now Clemson is at number 9, and they're full of question marks. So I would agree, because primarily Alabama and Clemson are not just complete givens.
Right. And Ohio State has more question marks than they usually do, than they normally do.
Absolutely.
And I mean, Michigan, like I say, I look across their roster. I mean, they're a fantastic team. Obviously good, really great coaching, but I don't know if I see a whole lot of like premier next level talent, next level players across their roster. There are some for sure. But I think they're getting by with, kind of a lot of, future role player, NFL role player type of guys right now. It's not, they're not Georgia. They're not what Alabama or Ohio State have been in terms of just raw talent. And that's just what I feel. So also I'm looking through some of these top 25. Some of them surprised me. Wisconsin all the way up at 19. I mean, as much of a transition as they're going through right now, and on both the offense and the defense, and holistically the culture as a whole, I think that there's a bit of an assumption there. Oklahoma at 20. I don't know. I mean, are these just brand names why they're getting put in here? Because
somewhat.
Yeah.
Well, I think people are also making predictions. If I put together a top 25, which maybe I will, I don't make predictions, meaning I don't look at the schedule. I look at how good the teams are. Oklahoma plays a really weak schedule. So I think people are looking at their schedule and saying, that they're going to go 9-3 and not even be really that good.
Yeah, and a problem, like when I look through this whole thing, this list as a whole, I kind of get troubled because I just feel like a lot of teams are overranked, and I don't see many that are underranked. There's not a zero sum there. I don't.
You're looking at these teams and you're ranking against a standard instead of ranking against each other and saying, is this really is this typically a number 10 team in the country? No, but there aren't that many teams. So it's to your first point that it appears to be a weak season in college football.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think it appears to be a weak season?
Well, I think that there are question marks on every team more so than there have been in the past because, we got to a place about 10 years ago where we had the most players entering the NFL draft than ever early. I think that's plateaued, I believe. I don't have the numbers in front of me. So that would that would let us know that the last 10 years should be pretty uniform there. But the issue with the transfer portal and a lot of these teams losing and gaining players that we don't know how they're going to fit in. The entire Big Ten Western Division is full of transfer quarterbacks. Every team except one has a starting quarterback who's a transfer.
Is that Minnesota, the one team
Yes.
that doesn't? Yes. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, that whole division, the Big Ten West. I can't find a team in the Big Ten West that I really think the arrow is pointing up on, at least immediately, at least in the immediate future. Okay, they really finished the season strong last year, and I really feel good about them coming back this season. There's not a single one in the entire division. I think the Big Ten West will go for a lifetime in the championship game. Retire.
One more shot.
Yep, one more shot, and that's a long one. And also another thing I've noticed, there seems to be a lot of conference balance in this poll here. Look through. Every conference is represented in the top 11. Notre Dame's an independent at 13. And each one, I think, has each of them have at least 4. Each of the power conferences have at least 4 teams in the top 25. Is that pretty typical? Is that pretty?
No, I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
I would say the typical year, the SEC would have 6 or 7. Then the Big Ten would have 4 or 5. And the ACC would usually have like 3. And the Pac-12, 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting last year of this conference structure. And we may have a fair bit of parity across, close something resembling parity across the leagues this year, which certainly makes for a more interesting product. And I'm still looking through this. Oregon State at 18. It's kind of an interesting one to me. Jonathan Smith's a great coach. I think this will be the best team they've had in a while. It's kind of shocking to see them that high, but DJ, there seems to be a lot of positive buzz about them bringing DJ Uiagalelei in, and I'm not 100% sure why. I mean, we saw him not perform great in probably a better situation.
So here's the deal with DJ is that you're right. So he had an awful season 2 years ago, and he was much better this last year, but still not good.
Right.
He had 9 touchdowns and 10 picks 2 years ago, and he went 22-7 this past season. I will say that his offensive line, or more so his wide receivers, really, really, really let him down. But he wasn't that good either. But the deal is that Oregon State was the number 15 team in the country last year with even worse quarterback play than what he can provide. He's a major upgrade, not even being a top 25 or 30 quarterback in the country.
Do you think they'll use him as a runner a lot this year?
Yes.
He does that. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what they like to do.
Yeah. So, and they've got a much better offensive line probably than what he was getting at Clemson. Their line play Their O-line played, I believe PFF had them as a top 10 O-line last year. So great. Okay. And yeah, so yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. I'm kind of excited. Interesting season to look ahead. And I don't know. And yeah, so
All right, Sean.
I'll check out now and talk with you later.
Appreciate you stopping by. All right, we will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Again, the AP poll is out. Does it matter? Some of you are stating in the comments that it does not matter. I would agree in a conceptual way. It shouldn't matter. These teams are going to start playing games. And if you're the number one team in the country and you lose your first 3 games, obviously it doesn't matter. You're out, you're done. It provides a narrative for the season. However, these teams continue to be judged and evaluated based on preseason ranking, meaning, okay, who plays a somewhat difficult game in the first couple of weeks? Alabama, number 4 in the country. Okay, Alabama's number 4 in the country. If this was fair, if this process was completely fair, what would everyone be ranked? They wouldn't be ranked anything. They would be 0. There would be 0 rankings because nobody's played a play. If we were completely objective about this, our viewpoint of Alabama would be the same exact as Georgia Southern or as Utah State. Everyone would be considered equal, and then we would start playing football, and then we would evaluate the teams. So if Alabama, let's say, I wish this was a week 1 game to evaluate. No. We'll take a week 1 game. LSU and Florida State. Let's take this for an example. LSU is number 5. Florida State is number 8. They will play a game and they will then be evaluated. As long as that is a competitive game, there will not be much movement in the rankings. Of course, the winner will be given credit for the win. The loser will be docked. But think about this. If you are the number 8 team in the country, if you're Florida State, you're the number 8 team in the country, and let's say LSU wins this game on a last-second field goal. It is just a classic game. Tremendous game. LSU kicks a game-winning field goal to win 30-28 on the last play of the game. What's going to happen to Florida State's ranking? Well, it's going to drop. Why? Why is it going to drop? Because they lost. Okay, well, wouldn't you expect that the number 8 team in the country, if these teams are evaluated correctly, that the number 8 team in the country could lose to the number 5 team in the country on a last-second field goal that basically shows us that we don't even know who the better team is, just one of them won. So, you know what's going to happen to Florida State if they lose? They'll drop from 8 to 12. Why? It doesn't make any sense. The other point to be made is, where did Florida State start the last several off seasons? Where did they start in the preseason poll? Nowhere. They were unranked because they had been so bad for so long. Well, if this was fair, and let's say LSU was number 5, and let's say Florida State, let's say this was 2 years ago, Florida State was unranked, and they played a great game. They played the exact same game, and LSU won the game on a last-second field goal, 30-28. The exact same situation. What would happen to Florida State? They would still not be ranked. That doesn't make any sense. The rankings are stupid. They don't make any sense. They're guesses. They're guesses, and they're not based on anything. Some people make a claim that the previous season's national champion should always be voted number 1 because they are defending national champion. Well, first of all, they're not the defending national champion. They were the national champion last year. It's not a boxing heavyweight belt that you defend. Georgia will forever be the 2022 national champion. Nothing they do this year will change that. They could go 0-12, and they are still the 2022 national championship. They are not defending anything. But if you have if it's your approach and perspective, and I totally respect it, that Georgia should be number one because they were number one last year, and you think that that's the case every year, that if you win a national championship, then you should be the number one team to start the next season, then if you take that same approach to be consistent, that means that every ranking should be exactly what it was to end the previous season. We should just take the final rankings from last season and start this season with those same rankings. If you believe that number one should stay the same, then why shouldn't all the other rankings stay the same from the previous season? If it was all fair, there would not be any rankings until somebody played at least one game, if not 7 or 8 games. We will take a call here in just a second. Let's also keep in mind, as I have noted many times here in the last couple of weeks, that probably 8 or 9 of these teams are not going to finish ranked. Look at that top 10. If we went through each season, this would be good homework for whomever wants to take this on. Go to each season and see how many of the top 10 teams, number one, didn't finish in the top 10. It's probably half of them. And how many of them didn't even finish ranked. I'm going to be looking at this as we allow Jackson to have his say. So let's go to Jackson. Jackson, what's going on today?
Oh, it's going pretty good. How's it going, Mark?
I'm good. As you're talking, I'm going to be listening, but I'm also going to be adding up how many top 10 teams from last year and in previous years did not even finish ranked at all.
Oh, man, that's going to be amazing, man. I noticed that this is the first time since 2009 that Bama is outside the top 3 that I noticed.
Okay.
And I see that there's 5 Pac-12 teams, 6 SEC teams, 5 Big Ten teams, 4 Big 12 teams. Florida State's the only Florida team in the top 25 thus far. And we're also seeing that Texas Tech got snubbed big time. I'm like, you would think they would get a little more respect, but I guess not.
So I agree that they're an interesting team for this year. I am extremely interested in Texas Tech. I'm interested in Texas Tech. They intrigue me. Penn State intrigues me for different reasons at a higher level. LSU intrigues me. Texas intrigues me. North Carolina intrigues me. So there's quite a few teams. So I get it, but do you think they've been snubbed?
Somewhat, yeah.
Based on what? Going 8-5 last year?
Well, I mean, they did beat Texas and Oklahoma last year for the first time ever in the same season. I mean, that's pretty impressive for a school like Texas Tech. I mean, I know Texas, Oklahoma were kind of meh. Well, Oklahoma was more meh last year, but still, though, that's still pretty impressive. I mean, I wouldn't be having Texas A&M over Texas Tech, but that's just me now. But like you said, you wouldn't be doing the rankings for the preseason because you have to at least win a game before you can be ranked. So, as they say, the preseason it's never to be taken seriously.
Yeah. Well, again, I think I laid out a pretty good example that if LSU beats Florida State on a last-second field goal, Florida State's going to drop a few spots, and LSU's going to probably just stay where they're at, or some people will be impressed by that and may edge them up a little bit. But the same exact game could have been played 2 years ago, and since Florida State was preseason unranked, they would stay unranked. So with the same exact game on their resume, they're going to be completely ranked differently. That's why this doesn't make any sense. This is the proof that these preseason rankings influence how people think about these teams.
Oh, yeah. And I'm looking at Texas. They're 11th in the nation. Right now, I kind of feel like they're overhyped until proven notice, because every time everybody says Texas is back, they always fall flat on their face. But that 1 year where no one's really expecting anything, they tend to go up. Case point, 2018.
So you're saying nobody's expecting anything of Texas?
Well, everybody's expecting a lot from Texas this season, but I'm not expecting anything but disappointment this season from Texas, because they always do this. They always disappoint when everybody expects awesomeness from them. So it's just we're kind of wait and see mode with Texas. I mean, I'm not asking them to beat Alabama or anything, but can they win the Big 12 or at least compete in the Big 12 in their final season? That's the question. I really hope that Sark can do awesome in his third year at Texas.
So you're pulling for Texas?
More so pulling for Sark because he's a former Saban assistant. Hey, what can I say? I love the Saban assistants. Florida State, I mean, yeah, they did very well last year, but the three teams they beat had winning records. I mean, they had a lot of luck against LSU in week 1. Syracuse was falling apart. Louisville was mediocre. They barely beat a Florida team with a losing record. They barely beat Oklahoma with a losing record. I mean, I would like to see Norvell do really well this year. I would like to see if he can win the ACC, but I'm just not seeing it with Florida State, because it just feels like they're one of those overhyped teams from the top 10 in the preseason.
I gotcha. So you're not feeling Florida State. A lot of people love Florida State. I tend to be somewhere in the middle, that I believe that they're a really good team, but they didn't do anything last year that really sold me as them being some kind of elite team. Beating Oklahoma by a field goal and beating LSU by 1 point in a opening game, and then really having no other games. Florida was okay. Florida was a top 40 or 45 team in the nation. Those were their best wins. Didn't really prove a whole lot to me. They should have beaten NC State, but they lost to NC State, an 8-5 team. They lost to Wake, an 8-5 team.
Yeah.
So they did bring back just about everyone that meant something, except Jamie Robinson at safety. He was really their biggest loss. So they do have a lot of veteran experience coming back.
Oh, yeah. That is for sure. And I'm looking at on the other receiving votes list. I see Roy. I'm just like, okay, obviously the poll watchers didn't watch this show yesterday. Because, I mean, do they not know that Troy has the second longest active winning streak in all of college football? Good grief. Oh, man.
Yeah, nothing from Troy. Now there's Texas Tech at 26.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, South Carolina gets an opportunity right out of the gate to prove themselves in week 1.
Yes.
So, I mean, they'll likely beat North Carolina because North Carolina's defense is such a disaster. I mean, good Lord. I mean, I'll go as far as say that's worse than Iowa's offense.
Yeah, Gene Chizik needs to prove something this year.
Yeah.
They've got players, they've got talent on that defense. They've recruited well enough to be decent.
I'm saying UTSA's getting some disrespect. They're not getting ranked. I mean, good Lord.
You think UTSA is being disrespected?
Yeah, I mean, Frank.
Why should they be ranked?
Imagine what Frank Harris can bring you, and what Jeff Traylor can bring you. I mean, the 2 straight years where they were dominating the Conference USA, and what they're going to bring in their
Yeah,
first
but
year.
here's my issue, Jackson, that any of these schools from the group of 5, for them to be ranked, just compiling a bunch of wins against the 90th best teams in the country, that doesn't do it for me. And that's what UTSA does. When have they ever? It's like the 2020 season when we had all those odd schedules, and so we had Louisiana and Coastal Carolina and those schools being ranked. Well, what happens when they play somebody in the Power 5 that's halfway decent? They usually get trucked.
Oh yeah.
I got no problem with UTSA. They've got to show me something against a team with a pulse.
That's fair. I could see that. I mean, that they'll get plenty of opportunities to show themselves, especially in the month of September.
Do they really? Well, they're playing Tennessee. So, okay, if they beat Houston on the road, and Houston is a decent team, a 6-6 Power 5 team.
Right.
And then if Tennessee, I don't expect them to win in Knoxville, but if they go out there and they play a respectable game, if they lose inside 20 points, then okay. But so, for example, 2 years ago, UTSA, am I coming up with the right season was that the year that they lost to Texas?
UTSA lost to North Texas in 2021.
Yeah. They didn't play anybody that I'm thinking of. Anyway, the group of 5, I have an issue with ranking group of 5 teams very high, just because they get stomped most of the time when they play anyone decent. So they're truly not just rewarding wins just because you're beating like teams that are 100th in the country doesn't really say top 25 to me.
Right. Well, I mean, I could see UTSA, Tennessee being a good game because, I mean, we could see Tennessee, getting a little high off their victory over Florida. UTSA, I mean, they're not going to upset Tennessee or anything, but I'm thinking they'll keep it close as of right now. But they will have to get through Army. I mean, Army's pretty rough against top 25 teams. They've shown that with Jeff Monken.
Have they?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if we ran a search, Jackson, on Army playing top 25 teams in the Power 5.
Well, I mean, 2019, they did force Michigan to go to double overtime.
Yes. Was that 2019?
Yes, that was 2019 on Fox.
That was the missed last-second field goal against Michigan.
Yes.
And as Mike is letting us know in the chat, of course, I think it was one season before that they took Oklahoma to overtime.
Yep. 20.
So good call on that. But they're not winning these games. But good call by both of you. Yes. Remember both of those games extremely well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's see. Well, and I know that they beat Missouri. I mean, they beat a losing record Missouri team in the Armed Forces Bowl. But they tend to fit, but our Army's one to watch out for. They are not to be underestimated against teams in the top 25.
Okay. Here's Army against Power 5 winning record teams. Last year, they lost to Wake 45-10.
Oh, yeah. They got smacked around.
In 21, they lost to Wisconsin 20-14. Respectable effort there in Madison. They lost to Wake 70-56. Remember
Yeah,
that one?
that was a high scoring game.
They in 2020, I'll bend the rules here and include Cincinnati. They lost to Cincinnati 24-10, so they played them respectably. They lost to West Virginia in the Liberty Bowl 24-21. There's the Michigan game in 2019. And that Michigan team finished 9-4. They finished roughly top 15 in the country, 24-21. Yeah, so they've held up pretty well. They lost to Duke in 2018, 34-14, an 8-5 Duke team. They lost that Oklahoma game 28-21 against a playoff team, Oklahoma. So yeah, they've certainly acquitted themselves. They lost to Ohio State in 2017, 38-7.
Oh yeah.
I remember that Ohio State game. It obviously wasn't close, but Army took up the entire third quarter. They held the ball for the entire third quarter, and they went on like a 99-yard drive and scored a touchdown. Their only touchdown of the game. They were down like 31-0. So that's really the team that's blasted them, in addition to Wake last year. So yeah, they've held up pretty well considering.
Yeah. Well, and I noticed that the AP poll got it right in knocking out UCLA because, I mean, they got a pretty easy non-con with Coastal Carolina and San Diego State, North Carolina Central, but they get a shot to prove themselves at Rice-Eccles Stadium in Week 4 at Utah. So that will be their opportunity to prove themselves.
Absolutely. All right, Jackson. Anything else for us?
Yeah, I just wish that the AP poll watchers would watch more Kansas football because I see that Kansas is knocked down a peg or so. But I say they need to grab up a chair and watch Lance Leipold do his magic in 2023.
Okay. So you think Kansas should be ranked?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, with Jalen Daniels healthy,
Absolutely.
they can
Like it's a no-brainer
I guarantee
after they
it.
went 6-7.
That was like the best that was like the best Kansas team I've seen since 2008. And let me tell you, this season is going to be the best Kansas team since 2007.
Okay, so Jackson, we got to put this stuff in perspective here. I understand that was a great season for Kansas, but that doesn't mean that they should be ranked in the top 25. So you are guaranteeing that Kansas is going to finish ranked.
I guarantee it.
Okay. All right.
And
everybody mark it down. Jackson guarantees a Kansas ranking at the end of the year.
And, you know, if I'm right, I'll crow about it. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it.
Okay.
So thank you for having me on.
Of course, Jackson. We always appreciate you. Have a good one.
You too. See you on the Big Ten show.
All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our good friend Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm checking in. Corey, how are you today?
Doing good. I figured since you're going to ignore all my comments in the chat, ignore all my phone calls.
I'm ignoring everybody's comments in the chat.
Well, you always put football above friendship, Mark. I just, anyways.
That might be the the tagline that I need to now run with.
Football before friendship.
Yeah, I probably earned all sorts of respect from my audience here.
That's actually really good. Football before friendship. Yeah, that's excellent. So, a couple things. I won't tie the lineup too long. But I saw somebody say, "Why is Iowa ranked number 25?" Well, they're number 26 in the coaches poll. I think sometimes we forget that these are all based on votes, and not much difference between being number 26 and 25, except you get a little number next to your name on television when you're playing.
It doesn't go off a cliff. Like it's just we could extend. See, this is one of the reasons, Corey, I would love to play with people's minds. And I've done this a couple times and people they could not handle it. I released, instead of a top 25 one time, I just picked a number and I said, "Oh, we're doing a top 37 this week." And people were like, just thought that was insane. You're crazy. What? Well, they're all just number. It's just an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
it is.
a round number that sounds good. We could have a top 18. We could have a top 57.
I
The
don't
only way
even.
to truly do it, it would be to rank every team in the country.
And here's the deal: you and I are all about preseason hype, and it's part of our livelihood. But like this preseason stuff, these preseason polls, they mean absolutely nothing. I mean, like let me rephrase that. They should mean absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
But as you alluded to earlier, they do influence voting the rest of the way, perception, all that crap. In an ideal world, if we're working with a situation where you're trying to accurately rank teams as the season progresses, the only appropriate way to do that, given the current structure, is to eliminate preseason polls. There is absolutely zero logical reason to have teams ranked preseason. There's none. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't do anything other than promote the sport, create storylines, all that crap. And look, you've been on here for an hour. I guess if we eliminated preseason polls, you'd have to figure out something else to talk about. So I get it, but it's just the most ridiculous. I just every year it happens, and I know it's coming down, and I just there's such a big difference perception wise between Iowa at 25 now and Iowa at 26 in the coaches poll. We talked about that in the Iowa show Tuesday. I wish they had received 5 less votes today so that they'd be unranked, because there is a difference in perception.
Yeah.
From other teams, from the media, from fans, everyone.
So I don't know if you were with us near the beginning of the show, but I used 2 examples. First of all, I said, what would be a fair ranking for everyone? Well, the obvious answer is, because I hear all these comments made from people, they should be ranked higher, they should be ranked lower, that, like there's anything to back up. Now, you can say that in your opinion, you believe that team is better or worse. Yes, but there is nothing factual to back up any of it. There's not been a play made by anyone. Therefore, what would be the fair thing to do? Alabama, Utah State, Temple, they should all be ranked exactly the same, which is not ranked, because nobody's done anything.
And let's also remember that the best way to create this week by week poll setup is to eliminate preseason polls. I don't know when you would need to start a poll. I would have no problem with a post week 1 poll, right? I don't have any issue with that. The problem is, and we've explained this before, but the problem is what's going to happen week 1. I gave the example of Michigan losing to East Carolina. All right. Where's Michigan in this poll? I didn't even look at the poll because I don't. Okay. So if Michigan loses to East Carolina at home, where will they be ranked week 2? According to after week 1, according to AP voters, where will they be ranked, Mark? Because we can guess this.
I'm going to guess 17.
Stupid.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Stupid. Based on it's and so the other part of this,
and East Carolina probably won't be ranked still.
Whereas they probably should be number 1.
They should be. I'll have them number 1.
Exactly. And and I know people will say, you guys are idiots. Again, we are so I think we're completely brainwashed by the premise that we've been under with these polls for so long. And the other part of this is, that these voters who are voting on these what percentage of these teams do you think the voters actually are familiar with? Do you think all these writers are actually studying in-depth South Alabama, Troy, and James Madison?
No.
Are they looking at returning production and recruiting rankings and all this garbage?
Everyone else's perception and rhetoric influences everybody else. It's a big echo chamber.
Absolutely. And here's the deal. I'll give you a simple comparison. You do a great job with your top 25 that actually makes sense. I think 2 years ago, I asked you, hey, how would you feel if I did a top 25 that actually makes sense for college basketball? And I did it for about half a season. And at season's end, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And the reason I stopped doing it, Mark, is first of all, you're running a college football channel. I'm running a Hawkeye channel. A little bit of a difference as far as how you can promote this thing. But I realized how much work it took for me just to develop a top 25 that actually makes sense, which means just actually looking through resumes. And it's no fault of all these writers and certainly the coaches poll, the coaches that are voting on these polls. There's no possible human way that they have time to study all of this enough.
No.
So if you really want to dedicate sensibility to these polls, you would have to create a college football playoff-esque.
This from fans from time to time. And again, I'm not knocking this perspective, but if you're going to have this approach, then you need to be consistent. They'll say, well, Georgia's the defending national champion, which first of all, they're not the defending national champion. And I know that I've uttered those words as well. They won a national championship in 2022. It's not a boxing belt. They're not going to lose that championship. They're not defending it. They can go 0-12, and that doesn't take away from them winning the 2022 national championship. That's engraved. It's done. We're starting a new season. So they're not defending a championship. But if we want to take that approach, like some people propose, that the number one team from last year should be the number one team, well, then they all should all be. Then the number two team should be number 2 to start this season, and number
TCU.
25. Yeah, we should just take the poll from the end of last season and make that the starting point this year. But that's stupid. But at least it's some because teams have lost players and gained players. And here's another example I used, Corey, and coming off if you were on board to hear this. But again, you are right in line with the way I see this. LSU and Florida State are playing a 5 versus 8 matchup to start the season. Okay, for the past 4 or 5 years, Florida State has not been ranked in the preseason. So let's say LSU wins this colossal game, great game, classic game, kick a last-second field goal, and number 5 beats number 8, 30-28 on the last play of the game. Well, LSU is probably just going to sit there at 5. Maybe somebody will bump them up to 4. I don't know. And Florida State, who knows? They may drop a couple spots, which also doesn't make sense because if you're the number 8 team in the country and you lose a last-second field goal game to the number 5 team in the country, wouldn't that be what you would be expected to do, basically, as the number 8 team? Why would you drop to number? So the number 9 team goes out and beats the Citadel like 52-0.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But they're given more credit.
Right.
So my point, in addition to that, was Florida State's not been ranked for about 4 consecutive preseasons. If you took one of those non-ranked Florida State teams and they were taking on a number 5 LSU team and they played the exact game and lost in the last play of the game 30-28, they would still be not ranked because they lost.
All right. So what you just said made perfect sense, but let me explain this for all the in layman's terms for all the fans in the chat. I know you got a lot of intelligent fans that watch the show, Mark, but the fans in the chat that need simpler language. Nick Saban, who do they play week 1?
They play no, you guys play Utah State. They did last year. They play Middle Tennessee.
Okay, so here's what could happen. So they're at home against Middle Tennessee. So they could literally, the PA announcer could announce both teams. No sign of the team. Nick Saban could go out to center field, take a dump in the center field, leave, and say we're forfeit the game, and they'd still be ranked week 2. They would absolutely be ranked week 2, and that is a fact. Okay, I just want everybody to realize how insane it is. So it's just the world that we live in of creating, and it's only gotten worse as far as social media is concerned, and these things can be promoted, and you get more and more platforms and websites, and things like this, YouTube. I get it, but
it's fun. It's great. Yeah, it creates a buzz. I've even posted top 25 lists during the off season, but the issue with it is exactly what we're talking about. It changes people's perception, and hopefully it's not changing, but it is changing the perception of the actual people that count. Listen to this, Corey. I'm not going to name what teams they are, but the preseason number 6, 9, and 10 teams last season, preseason 6, 9, and 10 finished with a record of 17 and 21.
Yeah. And I don't know who those teams are either, but I bet you it took a while for them, even if they sucked, it took a while. It took a while for them to fall out.
Yes, it
That's
did.
that's the whole point. Like, this is so stupid. It's, and honestly, like, how many weeks of losses would it take for Alabama to fall out? Because again, if they lost to Middle Tennessee, or if that whole dump at midfield actually happened, they would still be ranked week 2. I don't. Who do they play week 3? Or who do they play the second week?
Texas.
Okay, so they could be 0-2. I guarantee you, they're still top 20. So, anyways, it's just I get amusement out of it to an extent, but I'm glad that, how many people do you have watching the show right now?
150.
See, this is, I'm fine with that, and you're not one of those channels that likes to just spit out speculative garbage regarding realignment or regarding what you think could happen in some fantasy candy land out there. So I appreciate that. This is actually real, even though we both think it's absurd. You're not going to do a preseason poll yourself, are you?
I have not typically. By rule, I have not. I've responded to some viewer requests and done them arbitrarily in the past.
Yeah. That's the only reason, and you do what you want, but that's the only reason I would be interested in your poll, is from an entertainment standpoint. And that's that's how I view these polls that are actually coming out. It's all just for talk and entertainment, and that's all there is to it. I did say that I think the polls for teams like Iowa, the polls do more harm than good. Not that I don't know how much, to what extent they actually affect performance on Saturdays, but the difference with having that little number next to your name on game day, I just, I wish that Iowa week 1 against Utah State was 26 in the AP poll like they are in the coaches poll. But at the same time, as I said to you Tuesday, Mark, if they're 26 and they beat a crappy Utah State team at home, I mean, like, they'll move up, because that's how this works. It's, and I agree with what you said to Jackson earlier. I like Jackson, but if a team like UTEP or UTSA or Troy or some team from the Sun Belt is dominating their conference, who cares? What does that mean? I mean, it's good for them, but you cannot possibly compare them with teams that are playing Power 5 opponents 75 to 80% of the season.
Here's the example I was searching for, and it clicked when you just mentioned that. It was Louisiana 2 years ago. They won all their games against all their Sun Belt and Group of 5 teams, and they finished 13-1, and they were ranked like a 13th in the country. You know what their one loss was? They played a 5-7 Texas team outside the conference. That was their one Power 5 matchup. They lost by 3 touchdowns.
Well, and so some of that, I do think they're all, as it relates to polling, obviously record, like Troy. I don't know anything about Troy, and Jackson brought up how many games they've won, and I think Jackson's probably biased, because isn't Troy Alabama? Yes. That's an Alabama school, so there's some bias there, I think. But the reason I bring that up is I think record influences these polls clearly, but also there's all these different biases that are holdovers, like the whole, Georgia was national champion last year, or like Louisiana when they were ranked. I'm guessing there was people remembered at that time. People still remembered, hey, they went up to Ames and beat a decent Iowa State team a year or two prior.
Yeah.
In week 1, and so that, even though that's a totally different year, I get it's maybe the same program, same coaching staff, it shouldn't have any influence on the current roster. And I was kind of joking about the whole holdover thing, but I'm just saying, if we're going to do these preseason polls, have it make some logical sense. I don't even know what the criteria for these polls are. Just what is the criteria for this poll?
Corey, do you remember a portion of our conversation the other day on the Iowa show was, I let you know that I know this from conversing with people that partake in these polls, that some of them predict, they are making a prediction, like they're looking at schedules. And so after our conversation on the Iowa show, I presented that. I will leave the names out. I presented that on air to a few people, and I said, what is your approach to preseason polls? And they were like, well, I'll look at the schedule and I'll figure out, well, they've got a tough schedule, and I was like, there you go.
Okay, so again, let's explain this to the football for dummies people out there. If Mark and I were a team and we scheduled games against Darrell MVP, Jackson, and Chris, and your caller Chris, we'd be 3-0 at the end of the season, and we'd be number 1 in the country because there's 0 losses. We played a quarter of the games that everybody else did, and we're playing we're playing who we scheduled, and we have the easiest schedule. We would have the easiest schedule in football, Mark. We'd have the easiest schedule in football. So, yeah, it's just it is what it is. By the way, I did see somebody wanted me to bring this up, or they wanted you to bring it up, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow. But just real quickly, what did you think? Can you comment quickly on the Brian Ferentz engagement that I had with him on Thursday? The reason I ask you that, or on Friday, excuse me, is because I didn't think it was that awkward or uncomfortable at the time. And then when they posted the video, people seemed to really get up in arms about it. And I sent it to you, and I know you listened to it. And even though this is not an Iowa show, people know the name Brian Ferentz, given recent storylines. So I'm just curious if you had thoughts, and maybe this put a little plug in for that interview.
Yeah. So first and foremost, you've seen the banner on the screen, everyone, for the last 10 minutes or so. Corey Bratta, if you're not familiar, Corey runs an Iowa show and channel here on YouTube from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey and I get together every Tuesday at 4:30 Central on our Iowa channel. So we have a great time. We believe we deliver a pretty good football show, but you can catch Corey every day at from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey had an interview at the Iowa practice facility, correct? Brian Ferentz and other reporters were there.
Yep, media day.
Other media there. And Corey asked, I won't give the questions, but 2 very insightful questions. I thought that they were very fair, and they were also not just your surface level, how do you think the offense has improved this year? Or, what are your thoughts about, the development of the offense this year, kind of things. They were pointed toward these. This is the data. These are the results. What is your approach to these certain game situations and play situations? And yeah, I thought that the comments out of Brian were just, they were very telling. And it wasn't like he gave a 1-sentence answer and he was done. So he gave you a lot of time. I don't know why anyone would have issue with the interaction between you two, because you were very firm and had really good questions, and they were tough questions, but they were extremely fair, and they're very, more than that, they're poignant. They are going right at the issues with this offense and trying to get inside his mind, his head, to determine what is his mindset, what's his approach, what does he think about these game situations. So it was a great interaction, and to his credit, he talked a lot. He gave you a lot of time in his explanations, and I thought his explanations were not coach speak. I thought he was very honest.
Yeah,
but it gives us, when the term complementary football is thrown out there, that's usually for a program that executes that well in understanding what the other 2 units are giving that particular unit and how that's usually a good thing to be achieving, is complementary football. But the way Brian phrases it and looks at that, it's become a detriment to that program. They've used that to the nth degree to excuse everything.
A couple of the things, and I'll just say, nobody had. There were a couple people that were, fine with Brian's answer, but when I say people were up in arms, they were. You're right that Brian gave a sufficiently long answer, but that was part of what people had a problem with. Is they feel like he talks like a politician and never really answers a question.
Oh, I thought he answered the question.
Well, okay, to an extent. We can talk more about this tomorrow. He did, but you'll notice that I asked him the same question twice.
Yeah.
Each of the two questions, I had to re-ask the question at the end to clarify, because you get this vague response, very politically structured response that is kind of hard to pick apart. I just know that and I'm not ripping Brian, I'm just saying what happened. When we talked to other assistants, including Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz himself, Brian's dad, they are so good with the media, and that I don't know if it's a level of comfortability that Brian just doesn't have. I don't know if it's pride. I don't know what it is. I don't think some people thought he was condescending. Didn't feel that when I was there, but yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting interaction, and I know some people were uncomfortable by it, and I'll be anxious to talk more about that tomorrow, because it was the one question was about waist downs, and he asked me, it was a fine question, what do you consider a waist down? And of course, there's no, you can't draw a line in the sand on that, right? So I said, well, 2nd and 1, 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, sometimes 3rd and 1. That would be your typical waist down. If it's 4 down territory, so it could be a waist down. But he just sees those things completely different. And some people reacted. I saw some comments on social media. Well, you don't really know what a waist down is. You never played college football, Corey, so you don't. Waist downs are for the fans, the casual fans at home that have their back on their cap on backwards.
Why does somebody have to have played football to know what a waist down is?
That's the easy way when you're a total homer and you don't want objective thinking or questions or talk. That's how you get mad at somebody for asking a question and challenging something. But anyways, Don Patterson we've talked about waist down so many times, and this idea. And then I had one guy, I'm tired of Corey and I'm tired of Coach P. It's like, well, there are going to be people that go to the grave swearing up and down on anything Brian and Kirk say. But again, it was a very enlightening exchange to me, because I got to see, I had conversation with Brian last year at Media Day, but this year was the first time where I felt like I was able to really kind of get into his mind a little bit as to how he views these things. And frankly, the only way I'd sum up the waist down question is he just doesn't really, I don't know that he really believes in waist downs, or at least that's not how he presented the topic. It's almost like he looks at it contrary to how most football minds operate. And he brought up Rex Ryan. He brought up Bill Belichick.
Yes.
He's just like, we just don't operate that way. And, you want to say as a fan, and because I am a fan, right? I try my best to be objective, but as a fan, you want to look at him and say, well, maybe you should start thinking that way, because you're bringing up these people who have been a lot more successful than you ever have been. You're saying, well, they do this, but we don't. Look at the numbers, man. Like, maybe you should think about it. So I just thought it was an
we want to point people to that piece that Corey posted on his channel. Again, get on over there to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. So we got 195 people here, folks. So for many of you that are not locked in, and I understand not everyone here is an Iowa football fan, but at the same time, if you enjoy college football talk, and I got to tell you, Iowa is a fascinating case study that I certainly enjoy dissecting from time to time. But when you do it on a regular basis with Corey there from the Hawkeye of the Storm, because again, I don't want to give away all my thoughts, but we'll talk about it on Tuesday, because I definitely have some thoughts about where it was extremely telling of how he views running an offense in general.
Yeah.
This team. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I won't tie up your line anymore. I know this is supposed to be about those really important rankings. So I'll let you go. But yeah, I look forward to our show. Lots of nuggets from Media Day and from the open scrimmage. Mark, when you get off, I'm going to be tied up until about 2:30 Central. Give me a call at some point after that if you can.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All right.
Corey.
Thanks.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Jeffrey, we appreciate your patience.
I appreciate it as well. I'm glad to be back on here. I was cracking up though, because the definition of viewership going up on YouTube is just start to insult people a little bit, because you had like 150 viewers, and then when Corey was starting to talk about how he had to have some college football, intellectual talk for dummies or whatever, you spiked to around 210. It was like right at that time. So I mean, it's just, I don't know, that made me laugh, but I don't know. The AP poll, I get it. I mean, I guess you would say it's a farce overall, because there's no way you can make a poll perfect in the first place. We all know that 100%. But I mean, the idea, and you already said it anyway, but the idea of laying over the rankings from last season, it would be even worse because of the fact with the transfer portal, like in the draft, TCU clearly is not the second or third best team anymore. And I mean, that's why you can't lay it over from last season. You already said that. But I mean, no matter how you go about the AP poll, it's never going to work. I mean, even your poll, the top 25 that actually makes sense, which is the best poll that you could possibly have based on how you do it. Even you in your videos always say that every single poll is flawed. There is no perfect poll. You can't do it. There's some type of bias or opinion or something there that's not going to be completely equal. It just won't work.
Exactly, Jeffrey. Let's say after week 1 that Florida State beats LSU, and all the other games are chalk. Everybody expected wins, and decidedly. So let's say I evaluate that to be the best win in the country. Well, I'm going to rank Florida State number 1 in the country. Spoiler alert, everyone. If Florida State beats LSU, unless there's some other game I'm not thinking of right off the bat, I will rank Florida State number 1 in the country. Now, I'm making an assumption of how good LSU is. They might go 5-7. But so there are assumptions that have to be made, or else you can't do this until there's about 10 games played. There have to be some assumptions made.
100%. I mean, me personally, like, I'm with you 110%. I would rather have the poll not even be in existence until halfway through the season, at least. I would prefer that. I mean, I love that it exists in a way, because the talk and discussion that you have, it makes it all worthwhile. I mean, you literally, if you did not have the poll and you did not have all, like you did, I wanted to be on yesterday, but I couldn't make it. But you had the predictions or whatever live stream for week 0, week 1. I mean, this is what college football is all about, talking about all this stuff. And what we say, what comes out of our mouths don't even matter until the results happen. Like I could come on here right now and say Indiana football will beat Ohio State in week 1, and they get beat by 50, in week 1. And then I'm like, you look back, like, can't believe Jeffrey said they were going to win, and then they get beat by 50. But that's what the fun's all about. You don't know what will happen until it happens. Now, obviously, I think Indiana's going to get blown out, but that's just an example. All this is fun. It makes it worthwhile. Even if the poll is ridiculous, even if some people get mad that it exists because of how idiotic it is, it's still fun. If you didn't have the poll, it'd be something that we would not be able to talk about.
Jeffrey, you made a great point when you first came on here to say people love the debate. They love that. And certainly they gravitate to it. I don't know how much you're on Twitter, but maybe 5 or 6 months ago, I didn't have the intent on starting this, but something just struck me one day, because there were like 15 Florida State fans that were being complete morons, that were inaccurate. They didn't know their facts. They didn't know what they were talking about. And it just hit me that, congratulations, Florida State fans, you were the dumb fan base of the day. So I sent that out, and it just, they're outraged, and I'm letting them know, if it doesn't apply to you, just move on. But I've got all these comments from these Florida State fans that they obviously, and I don't recall what the topic was or what the situation. So then, a few days later, to show I'm unbiased, there was a reason why Ohio State, dumb fan base of the day, making dumb comments about something happened. And anyway, I did this about 5 times. I did Notre Dame one day. the Notre Dame fans were telling me that they were better than Ohio State because they only lost to Alabama by 17 instead of 28.
It has nothing to do with anything.
3 years ago. And
You
it's
still
like,
both lost.
yeah, you both lost. And actually, if you watched the games, you were down like 17-0, like the snap of a finger, and were never in the game. Ohio State was in the game at least into the fourth quarter. So just because it ended that way, plus Ohio State just beat you last year, like, and it has a better record every year than Notre Dame. Like, nothing made any. And I posted all these, you know, here are the NFL draft choices. Here's the number one choice. Here's the records, the last fit. This how many Ohio State's won, like they had won like 18 major bowl games since the last time Notre Dame won a major bowl. You know,
that right there should just put the nail in the coffin.
Not even close. You know, this is how many times they finished in the top 5 versus Notre Dame. It's like, you know, 19-0 or so. You know, it's not even close, any of it. So, you know, Notre Dame, dumb fan base of the day. Well, I had an exchange with a guy yesterday because there's some college football Twitter page that they just post lists of statistics. That's all they do. They don't have no opinion. They just list this Big 12 records in the last 12 years. You know, boom, boom, boom. They just list stuff. And so they were doing that for every conference. And as you can imagine, the Big 10 was just the Ohio State dominance the last 10 years is just crazy. So I retweeted it and I gave some context to it, like Ohio State 76-7 in the Big 10 the last 10 years. And if you think about it, Ohio State's worst record in the Big 10 is 7-1 in the last 10 years. And that would actually be tied for the second best record. Ohio State's worst record is also the second best record in the Big 10 in the last 10 years. And some moron tweets me and responds and says, well, that's because they're playing all those awful Big 10 teams. And I said, well, the list is all Big 10 teams. That's what the list is.
Somebody's got to win.
So they're all playing each other. So what are you talking about? And then I proceeded to say they even have the most wins. And in the last 10 years, they've played Clemson 4 times, Alabama twice, Notre Dame twice, Oklahoma twice, USC, Georgia. I gave this list that doesn't even compare against anybody else in the conference. Nobody's played those kind of out-of-conference games. And I said, this even further proves, because they're able to win 24 more games than their competition. And the final comment I made to the person was, I said, please don't be the reason I start a feature every day, dumb fan of the day. Please don't be the person that gets that started.
Well, I mean,
anyway,
I try so
rant.
hard. I try so hard not to say anything, you know, negatory or mean or whatever about any team or any fan or anything at all, because I just try to keep it chill. I mean, you don't want that, but it's like sometimes people they try really hard to get you frustrated, because I mean, it's clear, you know, especially when someone like yourself that just knows what you're talking about, you know, the sport. And then you're dealing with someone that's just completely irrational, and it's frustrating because it doesn't have to be a way. Opinions are opinions, and again, it's what makes these lists and all the topics fun and stuff. But it can be a little bit annoying. I will say though about the poll, one of the most irritating things for me, you know, about football. I love college football, but one thing I like about college basketball better, I think I've said this before, is the fact that you get rewarded for playing hard schedules in basketball. If you play tons of hard games and you have a ridiculous resume, you could be like 8-10 in quad 1 games or whatever, and you could have like 12 losses overall. You're going to have a higher seed than someone with 5 losses, but you've only played 3 quad 1 games and you're 1-2 because you've got a better resume. They're rewarding you for playing those games and even losing those games because you played them. And football, it's getting to the point where now that you're expanding these conferences and more games are being added to these conference schedules, the Big 10 is at 9 and all that kind of stuff, you're making these non-conference games irrelevant. Like, for example, Indiana, it's been reported that their game against Louisville in 2025 has been canceled. They're trying to cancel the 2024 game, and this year's game is still going to happen because you can't change it now. It's too soon. But it's like, why is Indiana wanting to get rid of that game? Because they know that if they're going to have any shot of making a bowl, that game's not going to help them. It just isn't. They need easier games. And I've always been a proponent for that. I'm like, since the Big Ten's gone to 9 conference games, teams like Rutgers, Northwestern, Indiana do not need to play hard non-conference games ever. Because if they do, you're essentially giving them an extra loss, and that's going to completely prevent them from making a bowl game. You don't get rewarded for, Indiana, you had the 5th hardest schedule in college football this year, and you went 5-7. You still make a bowl game because you had a hard schedule. And this ACC team over here, they had the 5th easiest schedule, went 6-6. You deserve the bowl game, Indiana. That's not how it works. So these hard schedules are useless. They don't do anything because, like you said earlier, about how the rankings are reflected by a lot of the AP poll voters. They do it off of the schedule, because why else would you have Louisville in the other team votes? You wouldn't. If Louisville was in the Big Ten and had the exact same schedule as Indiana, Louisville would not have 1 vote right now. Maryland does not have a vote. And Maryland, you can argue on paper, is a better football team than Louisville right now.
Yes.
But they don't have a vote. That's why the poll's broken as well. It's not just about the top teams. It's the teams toward the bottom.
Yeah.
Indiana, I'm not arguing Indiana should have a vote even if they were in the ACC. But if Indiana was in the ACC, there's a good chance people will be saying they might make a bowl this year. Probably. Maybe. But since they're in the Big Ten, probably have no chance unless somehow they beat teams they're not supposed to beat. But yeah, the schedules just do not help these teams at the bottom either. It's very uneven. That's why even from probably the young age of 6, I remember some family member telling me, they're like, you are what your record says you are. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not that. It's not true at all. And I'm like, yeah, my little 6-year-old voice, because it's like, okay, you're trying to tell me that this team over here that's playing 5 top 25 teams is a worse team just because they're 5-7 than this team over here that played 1 top 25 game and they're 8-4. Okay, you match the 2 up, and as long as that 5-7 team isn't beat to death with injuries because they play that hard schedule, there's a good chance that team's going to win. It's just how it works. The record is not what you say you are. It will never be true. I don't know why still people think that. I've even seen, even in chat comments today, that you are what your record says you are. You're not. It just is not true. Indiana, if they were in another conference, would have a better record in the last 10 years if they were in the ACC or something.
The night that Texas A&M was throwing the ball in the end zone to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa last year, that 5-7 Texas A&M team, I will take them on the road to play a lot of teams.
Probably at Illinois. If A&M's at Illinois last year and A&M plays a competent game, not the App State version of A&M, but the LSU version or the Alabama version of Texas A&M, they're beating Illinois on the road. They're better than Illinois because they've got 5 stars out the yin, whereas Illinois, yeah, you've got Devon Witherspoon, Cindy Brown, Chase Brown, but that's it. That's your team. Tommy DeVito he's good, but he's not elite. A&M's got talent everywhere, and even if they're doing things that they shouldn't behind the scenes in the locker room, it doesn't matter. They're still a better football team. They're just not focused. Like, I would argue, I'm frustrated that South Carolina is not ranked, because if North Carolina was playing South Carolina and they were both ranked, I feel like North Carolina would play better, because this game's giving me vibes of Virginia Tech a few years ago. It's like North Carolina at Virginia Tech, not ranked, and it's like North Carolina just completely collapses. And it's like, you better pay attention to South Carolina. They're not ranked, but they're right there. Treat it like a top 25 game. You don't have to have a number next to your name to pay attention to the game.
Yes. I don't know if you were around for this comment or around for this top 25 that actually makes sense. This was about 3 years ago, I guess. I did just 1 week, I did like 37. I just picked a number and just went to like 37, and people just couldn't handle that because it wasn't 25. And I was trying to prove the point. This is an arbitrary number, 25. It doesn't mean anything. There's no math involved. It's just 25 sounds good. It used to be 20 before 1989. It was 20. Why did it go to 25? Well, they sell newspapers back in 1989. They were selling newspapers and thought, if we could get five other markets involved where, our team's number 22 in the country, well, we're going to sell more newspapers. More people are going to be interested. So we can let's expand it to 25.
100%. I feel like if Wisconsin and Iowa were in the Big Ten East this season, I don't think they're ranked right now in the poll. But Wisconsin's 19, Iowa's 25th. And I know that they are historically, strong programs that usually do win a lot. And I know that Luke Fickell, is a coach that people have in such high regard because of what he did at Cincinnati. I totally understand that. But if they're in the Big Ten East or the SEC West, they're not ranked right now. They're not.
No.
Iowa especially would not be ranked at all. I mean, I get K McNamara, but that's it. Like their entire team is based off Phil Parker, a punter, and McNamara. That's it. The rest of the offense, because I like Caleb Johnson, but the offensive line of Iowa is not as good as it used to be. The receiving core is Nico Reganey, and that's it, and your tight ends. I mean, it's just not there. They're not a top 25 team, especially on offense, if they're not in the West, where you're playing teams that, are not very good on offense either, and Iowa's defense steamrolls them and you win 14-10. That's just how it works. Like if they actually, that's why people in the chat always say if Iowa had an average offense, they'd be a playoff team. They probably would be, because they'd win every game in conference, and then they lose probably in the Big Ten championship game still to Ohio State, be one-loss team, and then they make the playoff. I mean, they have a fantastic defense, but their offense is a problem, and it's never going to get any better with the current regime and at Iowa. It's just the way it is. But I mean, I see the chat comment saying that Indiana would still lose in the ACC. I'm not saying that they would win a lot more. I'm saying that if they were in the ACC, they'd have a better chance to win games. They just would.
I love the comment that we post here from Ferris. Ferris, we love you. You're here all the time. Enjoy Ferris being here. But there's two words in this statement that just amuse me. Number one is nobody.
Not true.
Nobody outside of Ohio thinks Ohio State has a chance. Doesn't have a chance.
Yeah. That's Michigan. Funny, because saying they don't have a chance is like suggesting Indiana does not have a chance against Ohio State. I can buy that. But you're saying Ohio State doesn't have a chance against Michigan when they've dominated them for the last 20 years and they've slipped up the last 2 years and they still on paper have a better football team than Michigan. Yeah, they have a chance. And the nobody part, when I was live last month with Austin talking about this game, I actually said that I was leaning Ohio State right now. So, yeah, nobody outside of Ohio believes Ohio State has a chance against Michigan.
Yeah, I got to make a call on that one here pretty soon. I only have about 10 days to get that figured out. What's funny about that is we have 63 media people that voted in this poll, and Michigan's number 2 and Ohio State's number 3. So I think I don't believe that there are 63 writers from Ohio in the AP. I think there's like 3. And the rest of them are from around the country. So I do believe that somebody does believe that Ohio State's got a chance.
I mean, this is another thing that's crazy about college football. And I will say that helps college basketball out as well, with more fans from more fan bases, having enjoyment. Because you talk about, like, you have an unranked team. Like just say you've got number 5. No, we'll take that back. Number 1 Purdue last year. Number 1 Purdue goes on the road and plays number 22 Indiana in basketball last year. Indiana wins the game. Then Indiana, still below Purdue in the rankings, goes on the road and beats Purdue. So Indiana's the worst team, but they beat them twice. In football, if you have number 1 Georgia playing, let's see who the 22nd ranked team is in this poll. Okay, you've got at number 22, Ole Miss. If you've got Georgia at Ole Miss, that's not impossible, because it's not even a good example because Ole Miss is in the SEC. But Georgia's more than likely going to beat Ole Miss on the road by a decent amount. It's just the way it is. I mean, Tennessee last year was the number 1 team. Played Georgia, and Georgia won by 2 scores. Probably could have been more, because Georgia was that dominant of a team. That's the thing with football. Like, these rankings, if you're not close, like if you're saying that the number 3 team does not have a chance against the number 2 team, you're basically saying that no team has any shot of beating a team that's ranked higher by like more than 10 spots ever, unless, especially if you're an SEC team that's the better team, or a Big Ten team playing like a ACC team that's ranked like 20th. And the Big Ten teams ranked 10th. In basketball, you don't have that problem because upsets happen all the time. And you even have the little schools, the Cinderellas winning all the time. In football, though, it's so predetermined, it seems, for a lot of people, that the teams rank higher, especially the teams that have these historically dominant recruiting classes like your Bamas, Georgias, USC's, kind of stuff like that. They're going to always beat, these teams that don't recruit as well, like a TCU or Oregon State or something, that are in the poll but they just don't have, as solid a team. Tulane as well. Like if Georgia played Tulane's 24th, Georgia's 1. Okay, Georgia's probably going to beat them by 5 scores if Georgia plays their best. But in basketball, if Georgia played Tulane basketball, if Georgia was somehow number 1 in basketball, which is never going to happen usually, it could in the future. But yeah, they probably would not guarantee blow them out. I think that's the thing that struggles with football. There's not enough competitiveness at the top between the rest of the teams.
Absolutely. And we've seen that with playoff blowouts year after year after year after year.
Yeah, I mean, TCU, Georgia, I mean, that would never happen in a college basketball game. More than likely, it just would not happen.
That was an embarrassing night for college football.
I mean, the NFL doesn't do that. The Major League Baseball doesn't do that. No sport does that. The blowouts was like 65-7, something like that. I didn't even barely watch the second half.
How many games during just the regular season had 58-point spreads? That just doesn't even happen that much during the season. Maybe 1 or 2 games a week.
It's because a lot of them, they take the foot off the gas. I mean, you talk about like Alabama. I mean, Cincinnati's a perfect example in the playoff when they played Cincinnati. That's a game that Alabama took their foot off the gas. They could have beaten Cincinnati by more than that. And Cincinnati had like 9 draft picks on their team, but Alabama still is just way more dominant on paper. I mean, it's the way that it is. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know. I love college football. And like I said, I love the debate and the talk and everything, and seeing whether teams are gonna have a chance. But it just feels, that's why so many people gravitate toward one of the top teams. I've said before, from childhood I'm an Alabama fan because of my ancestry, and that's true. It's not bandwagon, but I watched Indiana a lot later because they felt bad for them. But that's why people gravitate toward Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, because they win. And they win and they win. You don't have that problem in most other sports. Yeah, you had Tom Brady and the Patriots, but you just do not have, I wouldn't say dynasties, but you just don't have these dominant super teams. I don't like using super teams, but it just feels that way. I mean, Tennessee was really, really good last year, and that Tennessee-Georgia game was terrible. Like, I know it wasn't a complete blowout, but it was not a good game.
No.
It just was not a good game. And that's the thing. Like, that shouldn't happen. If you have Tennessee, Georgia, that should be a great game 99% of the time. And I feel like if Georgia played Tennessee last year 10 times, 9 out of those 10 games are going to be the exact same. Maybe 1 will be super competitive. But most of those games will be Georgia winning like they did very, very comfortably. I don't see it changing anytime soon.
I don't either. I really just, it's been this way for roughly 10 years or so. And, I'll summarize it this way, and I do this every so often. Think about the entire playoff era. Every meaningful win, meaning it led to a national championship. So there was the TCU win against Michigan, but obviously then TCU got stomped by 58. There was the Oregon win against Florida State, but then they got stomped by 22 points in a game, by the way, when you really let this soak in. Oregon led the turnover battle against Ohio State in that national championship game 4-0. That's unbelievable, because the team that wins the turnover battle wins like 85% of the time, let alone 4-0. That's like, and Ohio State still beat them by 22 points. So anyway, the entire playoff era of 9 years can be summarized this way. The SEC has won everything, and the only time they haven't, they lost to Clemson or Ohio State. Clemson has won. The only time they've lost is they've lost to the SEC and Ohio State. Ohio State has won, and the only time they've lost is to SEC teams and Clemson. Those 3 have done everything in the playoff.
And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, because, again, we still love the sport, but it is a fundamental problem. Because, I mean, like, for me, again, I know, like, my entire family loves Alabama. And I like Alabama. I really, really do. But I've told them countless times, would you rather have it where Alabama would not win? I know obviously Georgia now, but like a few years ago when Alabama was winning every single year. Would you rather have Alabama win every single year, or would you rather have it where Alabama wins once every 5-6 years and it was like it rotated, and like Ole Miss would win, or A&M would win, or Georgia or Florida, all that? It's something like that. And most of them told me they would rather have Alabama win every year. And like, I get that because you love the team. I do too, but I would rather have it where it was more competitive. Like, I know for you as well, you're an Ohio State fan, but I mean, realistically, as a football fan that loves competition, I'm sure that you would like it to be more competitive. Like Ohio State, like you said, has been dominant since the 40s in the Big Ten. Like, yeah, they lose. They don't win every year. But like since the 40s, Ohio State's been the most dominant football team in a conference in all of college football. It barely had any bad years, but if I was an Ohio State fan, I would still rather there be more competition. Like, I love Alabama football, but I don't want them to dominate. Like, I'm glad that Georgia won the 1 year, but like now I don't want Georgia to be dominant. Now I don't want them to be the team. I want it to rotate. Maybe someone else win. That's the frustrating thing for me. There's not enough. Like the Coastal, even though that was insane because none of the teams were any good, and that's why somebody had to win the conference. The Coastal was fun. Because every year someone was winning that thing. The Pittsburgh, North Carolina, Virginia, Virginia Tech. Every year it was a new team. That's fun. And that's the way it should be at the top of the sport too, I think.
I do believe how I would love the sport, even if my team was not a super team, because Ohio State, during the 1980s, though, there wasn't such a hyper focus on the national championship. But to your point, I feel for, and maybe they just, I actually give more credit to the Purdue fan, the Kansas State fan, the Stanford fan, if there's any out there, the NC State fan, like the good, really good programs. But they have do their fans talk at all about winning a national championship at Kansas State or NC State or South Carolina or somewhere like that? Iowa? Do they talk about winning a national championship? They have no shot of winning a national championship. Do they go into season? I don't know. They want to see their team play. They want to get to a really nice bowl game. Like, I would love for those teams to be able to legitimately, and their fan bases to legitimately believe that they could win a national championship.
Yeah. I mean, someone said in the comment section, there's nothing wrong with greatness. I mean, I get that. Like, again, when I come on here, I talk about Indiana a lot because no one else does. And it's fun to talk about if Indiana is going to make a bowl game. I just think it's funny. I mean, like I said, my first favorite team and still probably my favorite team is Alabama, but they win and it's not as interesting. I mean, I get it. Like, I'm glad that the team I grew up watching and still watch is great. Like, I love that. I'm glad Alabama's not bad, but again, still, to me, I like parity. I like more parity.
Yeah.
Because you just said it yourself right there. Like basketball, I get the Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, Indiana in the past. Certainly teams in basketball, yeah, they win more often. But you can never really say, though, that all these teams don't have a chance. You can never really say Creighton can't win a title. Like, Creighton got to the Elite Eight last year.
Yeah.
They're not going to probably win one, but they have a shot. Football, like you just said, these good programs, K-State, South Carolina, and State, they have no chance. You saw K-State against Alabama. I felt bad for K-State in the bowl game. Like, I was glad Alabama with Bryce Young, they blew them out, but it's like that. I felt bad for Kansas State. It was not a good game. A high ratings game, 10 million viewers. Everybody's into, is Kansas State going to win? They get blown out 40-12. That's the game. Like, that's not how it's supposed to be.
And they even got off to a great start.
I don't know. Yeah, they did, but then it just completely derailed, like most Indiana games do against Ohio State. But that's the thing. I don't know why the idea of wanting more parity, more competition, these games to actually be close and interesting. Alabama versus said team, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State versus said team could be more competitive. I don't see how that's a bad thing to want that or think that. And that's coming from an Alabama fan. That's just what I think. I feel like competition is good.
Jeffrey, as you know, I like to point out comments when they're either just flatly inaccurate or they need to be corrected. Or am I missing something here? So Michael is of course a Notre Dame fan. So he says college football is 150 years old and Ohio State fans want you to care about 20 only. This is what little kids do on Xbox. Look at me when I'm winning only. So wouldn't it be difficult if you played college football for over 100 years, and the game's been around for 150 years. Wouldn't it be difficult if you were only good for 20 years to have the best winning percentage of all time? That would be kind of mathematically impossible, wouldn't it? So how can Ohio State only be good for 20 years and have the best winning percentage of all time?
I mean, I just
Explain that
admitted
to
it.
me.
Like you said, Ohio State's been dominant since the 40s. I mean, last I checked, it's about 85 years, 85 years. I mean, that's a long time. Ohio State's great. If Big Ten once a week, TCU wouldn't have gotten just. Oh man,
Sandra is blaming the Big Ten on TCU getting destroyed in the championship.
To be fair, I'm not saying Michigan would have lost that by that much, but the way Georgia played in that game, Michigan would not have been competitive either, probably.
Sandra, I apologize. I kind of misread that at first. Okay, I get your point. They shouldn't have lost. Michigan shouldn't have lost, and they should have been playing. And poor TCU had to face Georgia.
I just don't think Michigan would have been super competitive either. The way Georgia played, I mean, Georgia played really good against Ohio State. Yes, Ohio State played an absolute perfect game until Marvin Harrison got knocked out of the game. But I don't feel Georgia played as well against Ohio State either. Like that, the way they played against TCU was the most dominant performance of any team all season long, even including Georgia themselves. That was the most dominant performance. No team's going to beat Georgia the way they played against TCU. And I get that the argument is that TCU's weak, so that's why Georgia played the way they did. But I just don't think that's true. The way Georgia played in that game, they were beating anyone. Alabama, because I've heard from people I know that are Bama fans in my life, they would have said that Georgia would have lost to Alabama in the championship game if Alabama made it. And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that Alabama would have beaten that team the way that they played against TCU? Well, it was TCU. It wouldn't have been Alabama. You saw what we did to K-State. It's not the point. Georgia was dominant, completely dominant. They blew them out, 65-7. I think they would have beaten any team by at least 17, 21 points, the way they played.
Although I would have liked to have seen Alabama on the field or somebody else on the field.
But see, and that's the thing, because I've heard from people that I know that, again, Alabama fans, that they wish Alabama had made it instead of TCU. And I'm like, well, I'm glad TCU made it because it was a new team despite what happened. Sure. But then they'll be like, well, Alabama is better. And I'm like, I agree with you. They are better and on paper, and that they would have been more competitive. And I agree with that. But then I'm telling, so basically what you're suggesting is that it should just be Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Michigan, Clemson, whoever the fourth team is every year. And they're like, yeah, because they're the best teams. And I'm like, how is that good? So every year you watch college football for the exact same four teams to make the playoffs. And it's like, well, we're going to 12 teams. All you're going to do is have more blowouts. It's not going to change anything, especially when you're having the Big Ten and the SEC being the two most dominant conferences, because they're adding every team out the end, and all these other teams are bad in these conferences. I mean, you're going to have a Pac-12 champion, and there's no Pac-12. If the Pac-12 still left, the Big 12, okay, you've got Baylor, TCU, they might win a lot in a year, but they're not going to beat Alabama or Georgia because they're going to have the exact same result as they just had. I don't understand the thought processing.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I've actually made the argument that, and people, until I explain it, don't get it, that I think those conferences, that conference in particular, is going to have a more difficult time winning a national championship than they do now. Mm-hmm. Because now, if you get into the Final Four, you've got a prayer. You've got some kind of miraculous prayer possibility that you can. Mm-hmm. But if you go into a 12-team playoff, yeah, there are more opportunities for teams to make the playoff.
More chances to get
but you got to win 3 or 4 games against those kind of teams. Mm-hmm. That's almost impossible.
Like, I know Cam Rising got hurt, but it's like Penn State. They talk about how bad the Big Ten is. Penn State is terrible. They can't win big games. James Franklin's horrible and all that. And Penn State is way inferior to Michigan and Ohio State. They blew out Utah. Like, I get it. Cam Rising was hurt, but they blew out Utah. And Utah is, well, before all this extra realignment that just happened, Utah was the best Pac-12 team left.
And Penn State had some really good NFL players sit out of that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's what it is. I don't know. I know I've been on here forever. I'm sorry about that. This has been fun. But basically the gist of it is that college football is the only sport I know that is just not competitive at all. It is just not competitive. And until I would say NIL would fix it. Thanks, Clint Moses. Appreciate it. I would say that, NIL would fix it, but it doesn't seem to be really. I mean, I get that, like USC with Lincoln Riley, they're recruiting great. I get that, and somehow maybe Miami eventually will be back. I'm waiting for that. Texas will be back. Nebraska will be back. Who knows? Maybe they will, but as of now, they're not, and it is basically the same 4 or 5 teams that have a legitimate shot to win it all every year. And I just do not see that in any other sport. Like NFL, you could say 10 teams have a shot. Yeah, college basketball, maybe 20 teams have a legitimate shot to win it all, even if it really is about 8 teams that have a great chance. But in college football, it's basically 4 or 5 teams. And every other team is just inferior, and they're just there to get beat by 25, 30 points by these top teams every year. And again, I still love the sport. That will never change, but it is frustrating because the thing that's frustrating for me is I feel like sometimes I'm, in the minority on this opinion of wanting college football to be more competitive. I feel like that. It seems like more people just like it like this. Like it's okay that Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, all these teams are the best teams, and that's it. I don't know why though. Why do people want that?
Yeah, when we start the college basketball season in a few months, and you look at all the teams, how many teams do you guess on the average season have a legitimate, reasonable chance to win the national championship?
It probably 15, maybe 20 at the max that have a shot. But I mean, probably about 8 to 10 have a better chance. But a legitimate shot would be about 15 to 20 teams.
How many teams do you think can win the national championship in football this year?
4.
Yeah,
basically 4. I mean, you look at the top. I mean, you've got Georgia number 1. So obviously, they've got a chance to three-peat, as everyone's talking about. # three-peat. Then you've got Michigan. # three-peat Ohio State. Ohio State, can we beat Michigan again, and Alabama? And then you look at, LSU, USC, Penn State, Florida State, and Clemson. Those 5 teams right there make up the slim possibility that one of those teams will actually be legitimate enough to actually crack that. And they're probably not going to. Like, I see Penn State fans. You've got Drew Ayler. And he could be elite. Maybe he could get it done. Maybe they can find a way to split the Michigan-Ohio State games at the very least and get in somehow. Maybe. I mean, it's not impossible. I'm not going to say it is. USC, it's the last year of the Pac. I mean, maybe they could win out or lose one game, somehow get in with Pac-12 championship win. They could get in, but are they going to be able to win it all, though? I know Tim, if he's here, he's probably not going to like what I have to say. The defense is probably better because it only has room to go but up, but the defense is still going to be super inferior to the rest of these top 4 teams. LSU, that speaks for itself. Everybody thinks Brian Kelly is bad. I mean, that we had the whole Brian Kelly, Lincoln Riley debate that I still have burned in my mind forever. So, I mean, does anyone think LSU is going to win it all? Probably not, despite the fact they have a shot. Florida State, Jordan Travis, they were good last year, maybe. But the ACC's bad, remember? And, are they going to be on the level? Because it's not like you said, it's not just about making the playoffs. TCU made the playoff. Oklahoma's made the playoffs several times. It's about having a shot to win it all. Because I feel like a lot of people think that if you just make the playoff, then you're actually legit. That's not how it works. Like you said, you make the playoff. Cincinnati made it. Oklahoma's made it several times. You can make it, but you get blown out when you make it.
It's easier. It's easier to make the playoff than it is to beat. Who do you have to beat? Georgia and TCU would have had to beat Michigan and Georgia. Ohio State would have had to beat Georgia and TCU or Michigan. Yeah, it's just now looking at those teams. If somebody told me today, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, or Alabama won the national championship this year, and I know Alabama's got issues at quarterback that have to be resolved, I would not flinch at all. The next tier I would give a chance to is I would actually go LSU and Clemson. I would drop down to Clemson just because their coach has proven it. He's done it. I I would put them on maybe their own tier. And I actually have more confidence in Penn State than USC, Florida State. They're all kind of I
there.
would be like, if somebody said Florida State won the national championship this year, I'd be like, wow, really?
It would be like, yay, we're back to 2013 again,
Or if
where
somebody
it's
said
not
Penn
determined.
State won the national championship, I'd be like, wow, they got past Ohio State and Michigan. Then they beat like Georgia and LSU or somebody, or beat Ohio State and Michigan again. Really? Wow. I'd be
I feel like
shocked.
2013 was the last year where it wasn't like predetermined. You know, he had Auburn in the kick 6 game. They beat Alabama, which was one of the most heartbreaking losses ever for me, but still okay. And then you had, you know, Florida State, and that was the championship game. It's like that's the last time it really felt like you didn't have the dominant teams yet. Alabama was getting dominant, Clemson was building, you know, and all that. But that was the last year when I was 9. That year. Ever since then, it's been about the same. Yeah, you do have Washington cracking the playoff, Oregon, but see, that was the last year of non-playoff. I feel like ever since the playoff is where we've been in this dominant era. It wasn't like
because
that in
each one of those seasons, you could say either the national championship game was the game, or one of the semifinal games was the game. Like Ohio State and Alabama in 2014, that was the game. I knew watching that game, that's the national championship game. I don't care that Ohio State was a 5-point underdog in the national championship game. That was stupid. Vegas whiffed on that. I was like, okay, these are the two best teams playing. 2015, then it was Bama, Clemson. Then again in 2016, it was Bama, Clemson. There have been it's been like one game that we've been like 2017, Bama, Georgia, 2018, you know, Bama, Clemson, and then then LSU just was, and then you can take your pick between Clemson. They obviously won the game against Ohio State, but who could possibly challenge LSU? And then Bama and Ohio State played, and then Bama, Georgia, and then here we go. Last year was basically that Georgia Ohio State game that decided the national championship. There's been one game that's been worthy of okay. And sometimes it's played in the semifinal. Sometimes it's played in the title game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, again, great and all, but it's not the way it used to be where there was tons of games that you could point to that were fantastic. Like you said, Clemson, I agree with you. They have a good chance because, again, they're in the ACC. They could win out. But, I mean, Clemson's not the same team they used to be. That's why they're 9th. They're not the same team that they were with Trevor Lawrence and you know, Deshaun Watson. That those teams were better, like overall, like the depth was better, like just Clemson, especially the fact they don't use the portal. Because they don't use the portal is the singular reason why they're 9th right now. And if Clemson was in the SEC, they'd be lower. They would not even be 9th.
Yeah, when I drop down and I pluck Clemson, I'm not giving them much of a chance. I'm giving them like a 2 or 3 or 4% chance.
And it's sad. It's sad that because Dabo does not use the portal for obvious reasons, and this is why they're 9th. I mean, it's really unfortunate. I mean, because before the portal, Clemson was right there. I mean, Dabo Swinney can recruit. Like, despite some things going against him, like Clemson a real deal on, but they don't have it anymore because they don't have the depth anymore. They don't have as many great players on their team as they used to. Like, that's the whole entire problem. Someone said it the other day when I was talking about Indiana. Why Indiana is competitive early on in games. Like, they were tied with Michigan 10-10 last year. And then in the second half, they got destroyed. It's because the depth runs out. They don't have the depth. The starters get tired, and the other team starts to roll because they have the depth to win the games. Alabama, it's not just your starters. Georgia, these teams have depth. Georgia had studs as backups last year on defense. Their defense would come in and play great. Clemson don't have the depth they used to. And unless they start using the portal, they're never going to have it again. And if they do join the Big Ten or the SEC, Clemson's chances of winning a title are going to get even lower, probably, despite the fact that, yes, they'll make more money being in those conferences, but now you're having to compete with those teams every year. Clemson has been in the ACC where it has not as much competition, and that's where they've had success. It's unfortunate. And then you go further down than that, you got Washington, Texas, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Utah. I don't think anybody thinks that those teams have a chance to win it all. Not one of those teams.
Yeah. Texas would be the one that would jump out to me in terms of talent, but man, I don't
Texas,
trust.
If they won it all, that would crack college football, man. It'd be like I was how old was I when they won it all over USC? Like 2-3 03,
Oh,
something like
09.
that. 09. So that was like 5. Yeah, that was just crazy. Texas, man. I mean, I remember when Sam Ellinger said that we're back though when they beat Georgia in the bowl game. That was the year because I remember like the next day it was so sad, but that was the year that Tyler Trent passed away.
Mhm.
But yeah, that year, man, when Texas won, that was funny. And I was like, Georgia had so many players not playing in that game. That was when the opt-out started to happen. It's like, of course you won, Texas. That was funny. It was hilarious. And it's like Notre Dame just isn't on the level. Tennessee, I don't see it. Their defense isn't there. Joe Milton's fine, but even if he struggles and they bring in Nico, he's not going to be ready. Penix is fantastic. I mean, obviously, I'm a benefactor for Penix, played in Indiana, but Washington's not going to win it all. Utah and Oregon are going to win it all. And then you just start getting the teams that just have no chance. It's unfortunate, but like, again, I've rambled for an hour. Apologize. This has been fun. But all I know is that the gist of all this with the rankings is that it's only a few teams every year. How many natties does Lincoln Riley have? 0. That's a fantastic question. His defense won't allow it. His defense will not allow it. It's never going to happen unless they get a better defense.
Jeffrey, we always appreciate talking to you. It's always great to see you.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. I cannot wait to talk some more college football for the season. This was a lot of fun. Very educational.
Good stuff. Thanks, Jeffrey. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, folks, there are going to be about 8 of these teams that won't finish in the top 25. Who are they going to be? Leave your selections in the chat. Start from the top. So here we go. In 2022, listen to this. Preseason, Texas A&M number 6, Oklahoma number 9, Baylor number 10, Oklahoma State number 12 did not finish ranked. 4 of the top 12 in the country to start the season last year did not finish ranked at all. In 2021, Texas A&M 6, LSU 7, North Carolina 10 did not finish ranked. And in 2020, LSU at 6, Penn State, 2021, I said LSU, I wrote down ISU. That's Iowa State was number 7 preseason in 2021. So it was Texas A&M, Iowa State, and North Carolina in 21. All top 10 teams to start the season did not finish ranked. In 2020, LSU at 6, Penn State at 7, Oregon at 9 did not finish ranked. So 3 teams in the top 10 did not finish ranked the last 3 preseason polls. And 13 of the 25 did not finish ranked at all. 13. So who's not finishing ranked? Vandy Dandy says Tennessee and Clemson won't finish ranked. So that's a number 9 and I believe number 12. 9 and 12 do not finish ranked. Okay, good selections there. Well, I don't know if they're good selections, but they're interesting selections. Anyone else before I rip through the list? We've got No Name who says, excuse me, TCU finishes unranked and Notre Dame finishes unranked. Notre Dame at 13, TCU at 17 will not finish ranked, according to No Name. Buckeye Mike. USC at number 6 will not finish ranked. Notre Dame at 13, TCU at 17. Okay. Maxim, North Carolina could finish unranked. Well, of course they could finish unranked. Give us a declarative statement. Are they going to finish unranked, Maxim? All of them could finish unranked. Okay. Felipe, here I go again. Alabama, Ohio State, USC, Florida State, Oklahoma going undefeated. Really? Okay, so we've got Alabama, Ohio State, USC, Florida State, Oklahoma. We've got a undefeated team from every conference. Interesting. Chris says Utah rank number 14 is too low. Well, they're trying to figure out who's going to play quarterback for them in week 1 against Florida. Bam. Vandy Dandy with the scoop of the day. Georgia will finish unranked. Jason, North Carolina, Oregon, TCU. North Carolina, where are they starting? They're at 21, unranked. Oregon and TCU. Okay. And understand there's going to be more like 8. 8's my number. It's in that range typically that do not finish ranked. All right. Jim says Wisconsin will not finish ranked. Okay, I would say the most likely candidates, you got to start at the bottom. With Iowa's schedule, they should finish ranked. I believe Iowa's going to have probably a 9-3 season, regular season. Tulane in the group of 5. These group of 5 teams generally don't follow up their previous season. That's a difficult one because Tulane, they're going to have to go most likely 11-2 to finish ranked in the group of 5. Texas A&M, Ole Miss. So there's how many teams in the SEC ranked? You got Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. 6 teams, I believe. I'm going to say that Ole Miss is not finishing ranked. I'm going to say that TCU is not going to finish ranked. TCU, Ole Miss. And then it gets tough up here because you guys, a few of you are pretty brave in selecting like USC and Clemson not being ranked, but the records and the history show us that out of this top 10, somebody is not going to finish ranked. And the most likely candidate for me is Washington. And then second is probably, even though I do believe that they're going to finish ranked and ranked fairly high, but if I've got to go to another team, I'm going to go to Florida State. If they lose to LSU, they lose to Clemson. They lose to Florida at the end of the year. They're going to have to go like 8-4, and then they trip up against somebody else like an NC State, and then or Pitt. Florida State's got to play on the road at Pitt in November, and then lose a bowl game to finish 8-5. That's what would have to happen for Florida State not to finish ranked. Penn State, okay, they lose to, let's say, Ohio State, Michigan, and Maryland, and they've got Iowa at home. They've got to play Illinois. Let's say they lose 4 out of those 5, and they're 8-4 and lose a bowl game. LSU's got to play. Shoot, it could go wrong for LSU. They've got Florida State. They've got Alabama. They've got Florida. They've got Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Auburn. I don't know who their other game is from the SEC East off the top of my head, or if they have another semi-difficult non-conference game. There are going to be teams in this top 10 that don't finish ranked, most likely. That's what history tells us. Michael says LSU is going to be the one go unranked. I wonder if there's any incentive there. I wonder if there's any incentive for Michael to be saying that LSU would be the one not to go finish ranked. Jim says Penn State finishes top 10. Book it. I think Rowan's got a good take here about Hugh Freeze and Auburn. I think Auburn's on the rise. I like Auburn to have a decent season this year, maybe 7-5. Tulane did lose their defensive coordinator. Felipe, so we got some of these teams to replace. Of course, if they're going to finish unranked, then we've got other teams that are going to jump in. Like, out of these other receiving votes, I like Texas Tech a lot. I like South Carolina a lot. Other than that, I think Pitt's a good candidate to finish ranked. I think they're the best ones, and maybe Texas San Antonio, just because they're difficult for me to judge because they're not a top 25 team. They are not one of the 25 best teams in the country, but they could finish in the top 25 because they're going to go, let's say, 11-2 in the regular season with a conference championship win. Ooh, like that search. Unranked team most likely to make the playoff. Circa 2021, Michigan. They are the one team, correct? I believe Michigan is the only team to start unranked and make the playoff, correct? I believe it's Michigan. All right, out of these teams, okay, your most likely team to make the playoff out of all of them? Who does Texas San Antonio? Oh, okay. Here's my team. I got to look at Pitt's schedule. I would like to look at Pitt's schedule first, but I've got another team in mind, and that would be Texas Tech. Texas Tech has a out-of-conference game against Oregon that could catapult them. And then against that Big 12, they go 8-1 against the Big 12 and win the conference championship game. I'm going Texas Tech 1. South Carolina. They got Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Clemson. That's too much. Although that's a lot of opportunity to impress some people. Man, if they play Georgia close, they beat Tennessee, maybe they lose another game. They're 10-2. And it's a topsy-turvy kind of year. We almost had 10-2 teams factor in this past year. But for me, it's Texas Tech and it's Pitt. Pitt's season this year includes Cincinnati at home. Of course, they've got their ACC schedule. They've got at West Virginia. So in the ACC, they've got North Carolina, Louisville, Wake Forest on the road. They've got to go to Notre Dame. They've got Florida State at home. I'm going to say Texas Tech and Pitt. Arkansas, that's a good one, though, Search. Anybody in the chat, non-ranked teams. There we go. Jim likes Texas Tech. Vandy Dandy, Kansas. That's a bit much. Jason says that Louisville has an easy road, but they'll have to get past Florida State and or Clemson at the end. In the meantime, Louisville plays out of conference. Louisville's got a game against Notre Dame at home. That's their big one. And of course, Kentucky. So they got Notre Dame and Kentucky. That's Notre Dame, Kentucky, and Indiana is actually a difficult non-conference schedule. But in conference, Louisville, good call there, Jason. Good call. No Florida State. No Clemson. And look at this. Alert, everyone. Good call by Jason. Louisville has no Clemson, no Florida State, no North Carolina. They do have Notre Dame outside the conference. And also, again, this Kentucky team is difficult for them. But both of those games are at home. That's an interesting one. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do like Texas Tech this season. Texas Tech last year, wow. They came back from 17 down to beat Texas. They had TCU down by a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and they got ripped off by the officials on a roughing the punter that they would have kept the ball. Texas Tech, they railroaded Ole Miss in the Texas Bowl. Good stuff, folks. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Please subscribe to our SEC channel. And I know the only way that anyone's going to do that is if I post the channel link. So we've got a Big 12 channel launched, and we've got an SEC channel launched. So please check them out. And also later today, we've got the Big Ten Live Show. The Big Ten Live Show is our next show on the docket at 6 Eastern Time. There you go. 6 p.m. Eastern Time, folks. The Big Ten Live Show. In the meantime, let me hit you with the SEC channel link. And also, we want you to check out our Big 12 channel. I know this is riveting programming right now as I look for the link to the SEC channel. There it is. This is where a producer would come in handy. All right. All right. We need to get this SEC channel up and running and cranked up. And if things work out, maybe we'll launch an SEC show. We should really do an SEC weekly show as well. We should do a show for each of the conferences, but there's only one of me. So that's the problem in all of this. Every time somebody throws out something in regards to what I should be doing here, yeah, I would love to do an ACC show every week for as long as it lasts, which is only going to be another few months. I would love to do a Pac-12 show every week. I would love to do a Big 12 show and an SEC show. But I believe that the SEC would be the priority, but would love to do a weekly show with all of those. And for those of you, and probably none of you watching, that were watching like close to 10 years ago, we used to do a Wednesday night where we did ACC breakdown, SEC breakdown, Pac-12 breakdown, Big 12 breakdown for an hour each. We did 4 consecutive hours with all of the conferences. So there's the SEC link. It's in the chat. Please subscribe. Even if you hate the SEC or you hate the Big 12 and could care less about it, if you enjoy what we do overall, understand the bigger picture. The bigger picture is to support us here at the Voice of College Football. And then if you truly hate it, unsubscribe when we get past 1,000, but we are looking for your support. If you've got contact with anyone who could certainly benefit from being a sponsor here at the Voice of College Football, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Want to celebrate the YouTube membership from MT Orangeman. MT Orangeman, welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Would love to know who you root for. I guess Syracuse, and how long you've been watching. MT Orangeman, thank you so much for your YouTube membership. Lamansky, Brian Ferentz, quote, Corey, how long have you covered us? End quote. Mark, it sounded rude. I heard that comment. I didn't take offense to it. I don't know that Corey did. Ferris says that Michigan has a 731 winning percentage, Ohio State 733, 2/100ths of a point. Yes, you're good at math, Ferris. Thank you for that. Yes, that's it. So I'm factually correct when I say Ohio State has the best winning percentage of all time. If they no longer have the best winning percentage of all time, I will say they have the second best winning percentage of all time, and I will say somebody else. Most likely Alabama will be that candidate to take over because I know it's razor thin between the two. And most likely Alabama would be the team that would take it over from Ohio State. Yeah, it's a great debate. We love debating college football with all of you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football right here because of your participation. Appreciate you being here. We've got the Big Ten live show coming up at 6 Eastern. We'll see you then. In the meantime, I've got a ton of content ideas, so be looking out for those. They'll be coming your way very soon here at the Voice of College Football. We released our Utah and Florida Week 1 preview. Excellent work out of our guys from High Top Sports and also from the Wild Ute. So check out that video as well right here at the Voice of College Football. See you at 6 Eastern.